Good evening. Health authorities have...
These vehicles may or may not have mechanical...
There will be a trial within a trial.
Louise Neimer at the Ontario...
The city does have a bylaw that requires...
I'm Mary Garfello. Tonight, prostitution on Queen Street.
On City TV, Channel 57, Cable 7, this is CityPulse Tonight with Gord Martineau.
Good evening. Here's what's happening tonight. The investigation into the death of a young man killed on the CN tracks in East End, Toronto. The opposition in the Philippines making big gains in that country's presidential elections. And Night Follow examines the winners and losers in today's provincial budget, a series of reports, live interview, and phone poll. First tonight, the new Ontario budget, which many are calling an election-style budget. Treasurer Larry Grossman has not brought in increases in personal, corporate, or sales taxes, hoping to gain extra revenue from an improving economy. However, OHIP premiums are going up by 4.9%. Budget promises $600 million over 3 years for job training and employment opportunities for young people. As well, Ontario will create 1,600 new daycare spaces for single parents on welfare, so those parents can look for work. Ontario small businesses also get tax breaks and grants worth some $80 million. A bit later in the program, Treasurer Larry Grossman will be with us live in the studio. He and political specialist Colin Vaughan will discuss the meaning of the new budget. Grossman will answer some specific questions about who the budget affects. That's later in Night Follow. Tonight's phone poll focuses on the new provincial budget. Grossman's budget contains no tax increase outside of OHIP for the taxpayers. So our phone poll asks the logical question, do you think today's budget signals a provincial election? Call us at 870-7770 with your yes or no answer. Look for an update later in the program. On the international scene tonight, the Filipino opposition appears to have won major victories over Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos in yesterday's parliamentary elections. Stan Bernard tells us tonight, Marcos now has a new strategy to regain his political foothold.
Ballot counting is all but over, and according to an organization independent of the government, it appears President Marcos has been handed a stunning defeat. This independent count shows 91 opposition candidates are leading, 79 for the Marcos party. But President Marcos has another result.
From all accounts, including that of the opposition, they are going to win about 45 seats. We therefore have a preponderant majority in the National Assembly.
The disagreement is focused here. This is a non-governmental clearinghouse for vote counting. Citizens, volunteers from all over the Philippines have been monitoring the election and reporting the results here.
Note that there are 13 seats that we have not been able to account for. This is
Brother Rolando Dizon has been reporting the results from the Citizens Vote Counting Headquarters on Radio Veritas, operated by the Catholic Church. The church has been the leading non-government institution fighting for a free election. The vote count recorded here is coming directly from citizen observers at the precinct and village level. But there is a very strong suspicion here of more vote tampering, and that President Marcos, with his estimate, has indicated how many seats he is going to officially allow the opposition to win. Whatever the final count is, Marcos has 3 more years to run in his presidency, and he has extraordinary powers. Some call him a dictator. Brother Dizon and victorious opposition candidates say too much election rigging by the president could lead to nationwide violence. Stan Bernard, NBC News, Manila.
At the White House today, Mexican President Miguel de la Madrid began a 3-day state visit to Washington. He and President Reagan emphasized their differences over U.S. policy in Central America. Behind Reagan's warm greeting lay fears that fighting in Central America is really a fire in Mexico's neighborhood, a blaze that could easily spread to all of Central America. Meantime, Reagan has reaffirmed a commitment to Costa Rica. The Americans believe the Nicaraguan Sandinistas pose a threat to Costa Rican neutrality.
The demonstrators said they were marching for peace and Costa Rica neutrality in the conflict between the Cuban-supported Nicaraguan government and U.S.-backed anti-Nicaraguan rebels operating near the Costa Rican border. Costa Rica doesn't have an army to protect its tense border with Nicaragua, only a small civil guard, and these demonstrators want to keep it that way. They don't want U.S. military help.
We have been living in peace especially because we don't have a military force.
But border clashes between the rebels and the Nicaraguan army, shown in this rebel videotape, has spilled into Costa Rica. U.S.-supplied patrol boats were just delivered to the Costa Rican Coast Guard. But Costa Rica's leaders have not decided how much U.S. military help they want or what to do about anti-Nicaraguan rebels who sometimes operate in their territory. Rebel boats regularly cross between Nicaragua and Costa Rica. Their training camp is located in Nicaragua across the river from a Costa Rican civil guard post. The Costa Rican commander says he and his men are staying out of the conflict.
We are completely neutral.
The commander of the anti-Nicaraguan rebel training camp insists his men don't need to operate from bases in Costa Rica.
We are inside Nicaragua, not in the border or into Costa Rica territory.
But an airstrip on the Costa Rican side of the border is used regularly by rebel forces who are evacuating wounded. But Costa Rican officials are trying to decide how much military is enough to protect their border with Nicaragua and keep the peace demonstrators happy at the same time. Mike Betcher, NBC News, San Jose, Costa Rica.
In Sri Lanka, an American couple kidnapped and accused of CIA spying by Marxist rebels last Thursday is free and safe tonight. At their home in Ohio, the parents of Stanley and Mary Elizabeth Allen heard the newlyweds are in good health and in good spirits. Their families have word the Allens are in the good hands tonight of a Roman Catholic bishop. Here at home, officers from Metro's hold-up squad shot it out with some bank bandits just north of the city this morning. Crime specialist Mark Daly says one suspect is recovering from shotgun wounds tonight. 3 others are behind bars.
The Metro hold-up squad won't admit it was staking out the Bank of Montreal at 7240 Woodbine north of Steeles, but there were enough of them there within minutes.
As best we can determine at mid-afternoon, this is what happened. The 2 bandits came out of the bank. The first man came out the front door down the steps. Sergeant Terry Kelly from the Metro hold-up squad was behind the first or second car down. He popped up, yelled freeze. The bandit fired once in his direction, and Kelly apparently fired at least twice with his shotgun, striking the 1 man. The other man gave up, and the 3rd man ran away.
Inga Rick was working next door at the Prudential Insurance office and saw it all.
I just couldn't believe they were coming from everywhere. And it was hard to realize they were policemen because they weren't dressed in uniforms or anything. They just looked like your average Joe.
22-year-old Jay Leslie of Milepost Place, Don Mills, is in satisfactory condition with shotgun wounds. He's charged with robbery, attempt murder, and weapons offenses. His 20-year-old brother John is charged with robbery and weapons offenses. Also charged is 20-year-old Peter Frustick of Denton Avenue. And Cynthia Seldom, 18, of Denton Avenue, is charged with being an accessory to robbery. They appear in court in Newmarket in the morning. Police say they recovered $3,600 taken in the dramatic heist, and Metro detectives are probing the suspects in at least 6 other bank jobs in the city. Mark Daly, CityPulse Tonight.
Metro police have identified a man killed by a train on the CN line near Woodbine and Girard. 28-year-old David Roger May of Darrell Avenue was struck and killed late this afternoon. Just last week, the area's alderman warned that somebody might be hurt because of broken fences alongside the tracks. Here's Terrell Joe.
Instead of using a nearby pedestrian underpass, the victim cut through this open space in the fence and ran across the tracks. He was hit by a westbound GO train. Alderman Tom Jakovic admits there will always be adults who refuse to use the proper crossings, but insists fences would at least provide a deterrent. Jakovic says today's accident means one thing.
The CNR still hasn't got its act together, doesn't really care about community safety, and doesn't listen to the general public when we talk to them about this sort of problem. We warned them a month ago.
Fences may be a deterrent, but what about a basic lesson, teaching children to stay away from train tracks in the first place?
Most of these kids, especially these younger ones, are streetwise, and their parents have done a good job with that, and their human instinct keeps them off the track when the trains are running. It's the kids from outside the area or the new kids who moved on the block that usually end up getting hit.
Sometimes, even when there are fences, they can be climbed. Jakovic says proper fences cannot be climbed or vandalized, as has been the case here. But while the alderman continues to complain about CN and the risk to area residents, he appears to have done little to help educate the public.
We had an accident a year ago just further down from here, and we sent out a notice to all the parents then, warning them.
Has your alderman ever warned you about the dangers of the open holes in the fences?
No, he hasn't. Not at all.
Has anyone ever talked to you?
No.
I've never seen anyone come here to tell anything.
No one ever warned you about the dangers of the tracks?
No.
The CN engineer who last week told CityPulse the fence would be fixed by last Friday was not available for comment. Tonight, CN says it imagines the fence will be up tomorrow. Terrell and Joe, CityPulse Tonight.
Prostitution along Queen Street West, the main issue at a public forum tonight at the Trinity Recreation Center. The meeting sponsored by Ward 4 Alderman Tony O'Donoghue. Mary Garofalo says the forum turned into a shouting match when former prostitute Peggy Miller defended the world's oldest profession.
It's a straight-out lie that you just said. It's a straight-out lie. Barefaced, shameless lie.
For the past year, residents along Queen Street have begun to notice a notable increase in prostitution, and they've called upon Alderman Tony O'Donoghue to remedy the situation.
No, all of a sudden they're spilling over to Queen Street. They have taken over certain corners. They fight before midnight trying to keep their piece of territory, and everybody's up in arms against them and against me too for allowing this.
Residents told stories tonight about the problems they've encountered: excessive noise, harassment by Johns, and territorial fights among the prostitutes.
Listening on our doorstep, right on our very doorstep, to the point where you couldn't even get in. You had to ask them to move to get into the doorstep.
I just don't trust the street anymore. At one time we could, and I just don't trust it anymore. So I'm very, very, very frightful.
14 division supervisors were on hand to defend the police in their limited efforts in dealing with the problem of prostitution. Legally, they say, their hands are tied.
With the past rulings, the evidentiary requirements that are necessary to convict a female for soliciting are the same requirements that are necessary to solicit a male.
One of the problem areas is Queen and Walnut. Fred Dominelli runs a BP gas station at that corner. Earlier today, I met with him where he told me that prostitution in his area is getting out of hand.
This is the worst I ever see, and you can see it day after day. It's getting a little worse and worse. And I spoke to a few of them, and which they were down Jarvis Street, and they said the police are cutting down too much over there, so they move it down this way.
Alderman Donoghue plans on taking the information gathered at tonight's public forum to the Metro Licensing and Regulations Committee, where he hopes to get together some sort of legislation for the summer that'll help ease the prostitution problem in this area. I'm Mary Garfello for CityPulse Tonight.
In response to the problem of teenage unplanned pregnancy, Planned Parenthood of Toronto held its annual public meeting at the St. Lawrence Town Hall tonight. The gathering addressed the widespread epidemic. Fully 10% of Toronto's teenage girls faced unwanted pregnancies last year. Western University professor Dr. Michael Fisher told the crowd that half of Canada's youth are sexually active by the age of 19. But teens still cling to sexual myths, despite all the contraceptives and information available on birth control.
And whether you think this is a sure sign of the deterioration of our civilization, or whether you think it's a welcome change in a sexually liberated atmosphere, one thing is bound to raise eyebrows, bound to raise concerns. It is a truism that, again, a very conservative estimate of 30 to 50% of these sexually active teenagers don't always use effective means of contraception.
Here's an early look now at what's happening in the streets of Toronto tonight from our chief assignment editor, Glenn Cole.
Thank you very much, Gordon. An accident on the QEW westbound at Islington has things a little slow there. I will have full details later on Street Beat. Otherwise, a very quiet evening in the big town. No major fires on the go. But a little warmth might be needed tonight because of the weather. And with all of the chilling details, live down to Queen Street, weatherman Brian Hill.
Well, Glenn, I'm standing out here with a ski jacket on, and I'm glad. Let me tell you, there's the possibility of frost tonight in the city. But if you've heard enough of this cold weather, well, I've got good news for you. We've got some warming on the way and sunshine, too. Details for you later on the City Weather Watch. But now, with a look at entertainment, here's Kathy Kastner.
Thanks, Brian. Tonight, I get to cavort with like-minded 12-year-olds, and J.D. Roberts gets to meet Hal Linden of Barney Miller fame. Now, for an early look at sports, here's Jim.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, the Islanders and the Oilers are tied 1-1 after 1. The Jays trail Minnesota 1-0 after 6, and Team Canada beat Mexico 101-72 at the men's Olympic qualifiers down in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Gord.
Thank you, Jimmy. Chum Radio's Dick Smythe has been chewing over the contents of today's provincial budget. He says it smells like an election. Here's tonight's comment.
At least we knew that Frank Miller and Robin Hood were stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. I haven't quite figured out who Robin Grossman is stealing from. His theory is interesting, and it does reflect a return to traditional conservatism among the pink Tories at Queen's Park. As I understand it, Grossman managed to avoid any tax increases by betting on a business recovery which he hopes will increase revenue from existing taxes. Theoretically, it should work. Essentially, it's the same thing that Ronald Reagan has been trying with only limited success in the United States. However, not to criticize. What bothers me is that we, again, have been victims of the old media shell game, at least twice in recent days. Grossman has put on his most mournful mask of doom and said, oh, yes, this one's going to hurt. Oh, there's going to be tax increases. Prepare yourself for the worst. Well, this was a painless budget. Would have been painless even if Grossman hadn't set us up for the worse. I mean, the provincial Tories learned that trick very well from the federal Liberals. It's not only media manipulation, it's public manipulation. I mean, damn few of us in the media have been smart enough to spot it or courageous enough to report it. And the final question, is this an election budget? I think so. This, the phony bicentennial, and any number of other chicken entrails on the lawn at Queen's Park lead me to believe that we'll be going to the polls before September.
Night Follow is next on CityPulse Tonight. Will the provincial government call an election after today's new budget? On Night Follow tonight, Ontario's new budget. It's almost too good to be true, indicating there could be an election in the air. Political specialist Colin Bond says Treasurer Larry Grossman is counting on $2.5 billion of windfall extra revenue from our improving economy. Afterwards, Brian Yasui had reaction at Queen's Park.
The title of this story is Lucky Larry, or Ain't It Great to Have a Treasurer with a Heart, or Here's a guy who's prepared to gamble on U.S. futures. Lucky Larry because the rookie treasurer is the beneficiary of that little lump of recovery passing through the economy right now. And because treasurers past were the villains who had to prescribe the bitter medicine of restraint in leaner times, that leaves Lucky Larry the easy task of adding present increased revenues to past restraint to come up roses. But at a press conference prior to the delivery of his first budget speech, Larry had to admit it was close. Damn close.
It was only a couple of days ago, a little more than that, but not long ago, that we determined that our revenue projections were strong enough and firm enough to rely upon in terms of making these decisions. So it was really at that time that we removed from consideration a variety of tax increases, some of which would have been uncomfortable.
Those higher revenues due to increased business activity saved Larry and us. So it's no tax increase and only a slight jump in OHIP rates, up $1.40 a month for singles and $2.80 for families. Now for the handouts. $600 million over 3 years for what Grossman labels as long-term employment opportunities for youth. $150 million to assist the older unemployed. A mere $76 million drop in the bucket boost for high-tech research over the next 3 years. $70 million in incentives for small business, including a partial tax holiday for new ventures. Assistance for communities hard hit by the economy, northern communities and farmers. And just to prove Lucky Larry is a treasurer with a heart, there will be $120 million up to 1986 to help those on social assistance, including 1,500 more subsidized daycare spaces. Home care for the elderly and the disabled will be encouraged. $27 million for gains means the single elderly will be getting just over $8,000 by the end of 1984, $13,000 plus for couples. And how did Lucky Larry manage to put together this magical mystery tour?
We've been able to do it because of healthy revenue performance, and with that available to us, we opted not to go for tax increases, and we've been able to accomplish a modest deficit reduction.
And the other rabbit pulled out of the Grossman hat today, the $2.6 billion 1983 deficit is projected down to just over $2 billion this year. And that'll help the province's credit rating. And it's all predicated on the boomlet continuing, riding along on what Grossman prays will be continued prosperity in the United States. What a guy, what a magician, what a gambler, what a treasurer. Love that Lucky Larry. Colin Bourne, Queen's Park, CityPulse Tonight.
Well, Colin Vaughan may have been pleasantly surprised by the budget, but here at Queen's Park, the opposition leaders didn't like it a bit.
It really is, in my 8 years here, many of them as finance critic, the thinnest, least substantial budget that I have seen. And Grossman had hyped himself up to bring the new economic message to the province of Ontario. He was going to face it in new, creative ways. And I believe that close scrutiny tells you that Grossman has overhyped himself and has not measured up to his own expectations.
It's nothing short of a fraud. The bottom line is that Mr. Grossman is spending less
on new job creation for young people than he's getting in revenue from the racetrack. In fact, he's cutting back. He's cutting back in the environment. He's cutting back on spending in education in real terms. He's cutting back in many, many areas. And really, this is kind of a Bill Bennett and drag budget. He claims to be doing a lot of things, but he's not.
The budget isn't worth much to the president of the Ontario Federation of Labor. Cliff Pilkey complains that it doesn't have any programs to create jobs.
What the government needed to do was to have a job creation program, and they could have done that in a number of areas. Housing as an illustration, highways need to be constructed, chronic care facilities we need, municipal projects, we could take them off the shelves. We could have created hundreds upon hundreds of jobs if the government had addressed themselves to that problem in this budget.
The Canadian Organization of Small Business says it doesn't get much help either. And Jeffrey Hale of the organization is quite angry.
The budget has a lot of make-work programs for bureaucrats, but I don't know how many real new jobs it's going to create. Frankly, by hitting small business, which creates most of the new jobs in Ontario with a whopping tax increase, Mr. Grossman may be going backwards instead of forwards.
You can't please all of the people all of the time, but for the majority of Ontarians, you can almost hear that collective sigh of relief because there's no tax hike. The only question is, will there be a price to pay later because of the tax holiday now? Brian Yasui, Queen's Park, CityPulse Tonight.
And our political specialist Colin Bond is live in the studio now with Ontario Treasurer Larry Grossman. Colin.
Larry, how are you? What is a Bill Bennett and drag? Have you figured that one out yet?
I don't understand lots of what Bob Ray says. So
no, that one's gone over my head. Well, you said at 6 o'clock that you were worried about me going away thinking about this for a few hours, and I have thought about it for a few hours, and I've concluded it's a very timid budget. For a gutsy little guy like you, I have.
No way.
You say that 10 days ago it looked as though you may have to increase taxes. And when we're going to come back to that, I want to know what happened 10 days ago, because I can't figure it out. But when you figured out you didn't have to increase taxes, you had right on your doorstep a chance to perhaps put a few taxes on and do some very brave, bold stroke, big things. You didn't do it. It's a timid budget.
Oh, no, it really is. With respect, Colin, I mean, I think it's an extremely bold budget document to stack it up against the kinds of budgets, particularly we've seen in Ottawa in the past few years. What we've done is not go for some things which probably would have made my life easier in the next couple of months, make work projects, be able to stand up in July or August and say, look, we've created 100,000 jobs, 110,000 jobs for young people.
Why wouldn't that be a good thing to do?
Well, the question is, are you doing much more for those people than giving them 6 or 8 weeks of filing documents in a government office? If that's all you do, you've done a short-term political fix. You haven't helped the young people in the long term.
Well, what about Cliff Pilkey? Cliff Pilkey says municipal projects, highway construction, and, the highways, Snow has been complaining. The Minister of Transportation has been complaining about the state of the highways. Why not get into some public works that isn't filing in government offices?
Well, we'll be spending about $2.4 billion this year on public works, on capital construction.
Yes, but the argument of Labour and the Labour movement is, why not make it $3.4 billion and create some actual long-term jobs?
That's the kind of position one takes if the economy is going very slowly and you have to begin to stimulate it in a couple of sectors. What we have in Ontario is still a very bold recovery. It's at 4.7%.
And a very timid budget. Now,
of course, there's lots of things you could call it, Colin. Timid isn't one of them. It is the first budget I suggest you've seen in a long time, which builds for the future, which is a building block for next year and the year after, which hasn't gone for stopgap measures. It's a little more long-term than some recent ones, but Frank Miller didn't have those options because he was working in a real depression. You're coming out of a depression. You're lucky. Lucky Larry. There's no question that the economic environment this year is an easier one than Frank had. He did a marvelous job in difficult circumstances.
What happened 10 days ago that made it possible not to impose taxes? Now, I've thought back. We have the dollar dropping. We have interest rates going up. We have a huge deficit in the United States. The economy is in a mess. What happened that took the taxes off?
Well, wait, the economy is not in a mess. There are more people employed in Ontario today than ever before in our history. The job recovery since the depths of the recession is over 200,000 in Ontario. Unemployment is still too high at 9.1, but in the rest of Canada it's 12.7.
We made up a few points in unemployment, from 12 to about 9.
Well, that's a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And it does indicate that something's happening in the economy, particularly when one looks at the full-time job recovery. Sometimes, you know, the part-time job recovery is just easy to get. But what is the true measure is full-time job recovery. It's tremendous in Ontario.
Well,
so it is growing very strongly.
We'd better wait the 3 years for these 3-year programs to take hold to see whether you are right or wrong. Gordon, back to you.
It's a long-term investment.
Long-term investment, yeah. Gordon, back to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're interested to know what the taxpayers out on Metro streets tonight think about the new budget. So our news cameraman went to the streets tonight to ask if you think today's budget signals a provincial election.
Sure it does. That's why everything's positive. If they wanted to put something negative in the budget, that hurt their election hopes.
Only Davis can answer that.
With business getting pretty well what they wanted, so I think that it's set up for an election.
It's not a people's budget. It's for, everything's going up, the taxes, and it's just not right for the people right now. And if they have an election, I think that's going to be the downfall of the Conservative government.
You'll be interested in an update of tonight's phone poll. We're asking if you think today's budget signals a provincial election. So far, 76% of our callers say yes, 24% say no. We're still taking your calls, so phone us at 870-7770. With your yes or no answer, we'll have a final tally later on. The end of Phase 1 of the Grange inquiry. Those details in a moment, just ahead of CityPulse weather.
I'm Brian Hill. Don't put away your ski jacket just yet. A very cold night, but the sun will be shining tomorrow. Complete weather details coming up.
The final witness took the stand today in the first phase of the Grange Commission, investigating unexplained baby deaths at the hospital for sick children. Lauren Honickman says the final word came from an expert on nursing practices.
Dr. Marion McGee is Director of Health Sciences at the University of Ottawa. She's been involved in the nursing profession for some 31 years. She was asked why some nurses don't seem to react emotionally to the death of a baby.
It's the frequency of very ill people dying unexpectedly is not unusual. That happens fairly frequently.
Nursing Association lawyer Fran Kitely attempted to draw hypothetical situations about testimony the Commission has already heard, and then asked Dr. McGee her opinion. But Commissioner Grange felt the witness was being asked to offer an opinion about the credibility of previous witnesses.
You can't do it, because what you're doing is you're trying to ask Dr. McGee to take over my job, and I'd be delighted if she would, but I'm not allowed to do that, at least not yet.
McGee was allowed to give her opinion on how the Grange Commission has affected the field of nursing. On the negative side, she feels nurses will have to be more militant to protect their own interests, because many times they're in a no-win situation. But she also feels the inquiry has had a very positive effect.
The healthcare system and nursing service and nursing science within that system will be improved by the forced self-examination of both the system and the discipline. So in that respect, I would expect positive changes.
So after 11 months and 418 exhibits, the inquiry has finally heard from its final witness in the first phase. Commissioner Grange will take the day off tomorrow, and on Thursday he will tell us what he plans to do with Phase 2. That was the phase that was supposed to look into the investigation and subsequent arrest of Susan Nellis. Lauren Honickman at the Grange Commission, CityPulse Tonight.
The weather is next, and Brian says a frosty one tonight.
Looking good for tomorrow. By the time most people get up, it's going to be good news. That old storm is a cold air storm, and it's moving off. What's good news is that this warmth is being pulled up. Watch the clouds moving up around the center of high pressure, which is ridging down to the U.S., and that is good news for us. Eventually, later this week, we'll get up above normal, and you can see the clearing from it on the visual satellite shot here. Thursday, even better than Wednesday. A lot to look forward to, and on the eastern seaboard close-up, you can see just getting rid of the clouds that are over top of us tonight. We have all this clearing that is coming our way. When is it going to get here? Let's go to computer graphics and future weather, and I'll show you when. If you're thinking about using your cycle to get into work tomorrow morning, I know there'll be some clouds around when you get up to go to work, and it'll be a strong, pretty strong blow, moderate from the northwest tomorrow morning, but go anyway, because it'll be a beautiful trip home. And here's why. The last remnants of the cloud will be with us tomorrow morning, and then watch them. They'll just hop out of the Toronto area by afternoon and stay that way for the evening go-home rush hour. Looks really good, and by tomorrow evening, practically clear right across the province, just maybe around the Kingston area, a little bit of cloud left. On the video skyline tonight, I can show you what it's going to be like as far as the temperature is concerned. Normal at this time of year is about 17. Overnight tonight, frost is a possibility. Yes, nice and cool. 8 a.m., still cool, but sunny. And during the day, that sunshine will help warm up the air to a level of about 15 degrees, not too much wind, so looks good for tomorrow in Toronto, and it looks good for the holiday weekend. More about that later on the 5-day forecast. But right now, this is how it looks outside. And here's how it feels. +7, 45 is none too warm, and this is what makes it really feel cool. Winds tonight gusting up to 20 kilometers per hour. We think they're going to die off during the night and then reappear in the morning. Barometric pressure 102.2 is rising. What's important about that wind is as it dies off overnight tonight, it means that the cool temperatures can collect, relative humidity 46% and dry. And that means that possibility of frost exists. As long as there's wind, the air mixes, and that means that it doesn't get as cold. Low of 3. So without wind overnight tonight, especially in the low-lying areas, the temperature falls. So frost in the suburbs, almost in the downtown core. 8 a.m. +4, but sunny. So you might want to take a sweater and sunglasses on the way to work tomorrow. Gord, we're finally getting back to normal. That's the City Weather Watch.
It's about time, Stanley. Entertainment next when we come back.
Tonight, I discover you don't have to be a kid to have a good time.
Time to find out what's happening out in the city, and because Jeannie Becker is away on holidays, we drew from the weekend talent pool, and here's Kathy Kastner.
Thanks, Gord. Today, I had a chance to revert back to childhood. The 3rd annual Toronto International Children's Festival opened at Harbourfront, and I got to see, among other things, the Canadian premiere of Switzerland's La Pantomime Clownesh. For the next week, there'll be 4 different shows going on at all times at Harbourfront. But not all the fun is happening inside. Why did you get your face painted?
Well, because everybody else was.
Why did you choose this design?
Because my friend had it.
Can we see the friend here? Let's see a friend here. Although the festival is kid-oriented, it's easy to get into the spirit. And who knows what untapped talent is waiting to be discovered out there.
If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting.
I don't think Cyndi Lauper has to worry at all. Remember, some of the shows at the festival are sold out, so phone Harbourfront for more information. Barney Miller, I love the show. I cried when it was canceled. Fortunately for me, Hal Linden, Mr. Barney Miller himself, is at the Imperial Room. And as J.D. Roberts discovered, there's more to Hal Linden than we met in Barney Miller.
I saw a sparkle of rain. I saw it kissing a rose. It made me smile, smile, smile.
Linden's nightclub act is rooted in the traditions of Broadway musicals. After all, he did 18 of them before putting together his own song and dance routine. Hal's show is a little sentimental, but delivered with enthusiasm. Because a lot of his time is taken up with movies and television, the nightclub act is an exciting change.
The way it is now, I do it so rarely that I get excited all over again, and we work on the act in between and polish it up and put little new things in to try and keep it exciting for me. So it is exciting because this is the prime communication between a performer and an audience.
Linden has been allowed more freedom to tour since his television series Barney Miller was canceled. He says he actually wasn't too sad to see the show retired, as it required him to do so much of one type of performing.
However, that was a once-in-a-lifetime show. That maybe once in everybody's lifetime show.
Aside from performing, Hal now spends a lot of time pursuing golf, a sport he treats very philosophically.
For me, every time I go out to play golf, it's a running battle between me and myself, between my mind and my body. My mind knows how to hit the ball, and it tells my body how to do it. And my body refuses to listen to my mind. My body says, oh, no, 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 I'm in charge. I do what I want to do.
That's the hard stuff, what you're doing here in the Imperial Room. That comes easy.
That's easy.
I love him. Hal Linden is at the Imperial Room all this week. First Choice and Super Channel, the competing pay TV stations, are expected to file a merger application this week. Critics are saying that if the merger goes through, it'll be a step toward the way pay TV should have been licensed in the first place, as a monopoly. Here's J.D. Roberts.
The CRTC originally granted 6 licenses, 3 national networks and 3 regional networks. Of the English language broadcasters, only 2 remain in operation, Super Channel and First Choice, which ran into financial difficulty last fall. If a merger were to take place, it would leave one player to service the 500,000 subscribers online now. The official First Choice position in the merger is, there have been a number of conversations about a number of areas of cooperation. Super Channel is a little more direct, saying, we have had discussions with First Choice, but no agreement exists. In Ottawa, Communications Minister Francis Fox had no comment on the issue, but other officials wouldn't be surprised if a merger took place.
The whole pay TV mechanism in this country has to be taken a look at. And I think the CRTC, in its hearings to decide on the merger, is going to have to ask some very stiff and serious questions about the value of pay TV in this country.
The Canadian market can only support one pay TV service at best.
Frank Augustin, principal dancer with the National Ballet, will be teaming up with someone other than Karen Kane. He's just announced his engagement to Irini Christopher, a group product manager with Max Factor. The exact wedding date hasn't been set, but I'm sure we'll be the first to know. And finally tonight, rock singer Ozzy Osbourne is in the news again. This time he was arrested in Memphis, Tennessee. The charge, public drunkenness. He was nabbed just after midnight and released 5 hours later in plenty of time to do his concert there. And that's it for the entertainment
Quite
scene.
a character. Now, this is your first time doing the entertainment segment from down here in the studio. How'd you like it?
Well, I get to sit next to you, don't I?
Oh, flattery.
Thousands would kill for this opportunity.
You did very well. Congratulations.
Thanks.
You'll be back with us again tomorrow night.
I will. In fact, I'll be back later on tonight. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you'll be doing entertainment again for the rest of the week.
You've got me here for the rest of the week.
We'll be back at the end of the show, of course. Thank you. We'll have sports with Howie next.
This is Jim McKinney, and the Oilers and the Islanders are in a real dogfight out in Edmonton tonight.
Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals.
That's right. Quite a game it is, too, Gord. Everyone was saying that it'd be a whole different story when they got out to Edmonton. The Oilers came out very strong in the first, but it was the Islanders that got on the board first, and it was a giveaway in the Oilers zone that cost them the... Oh, right there. There's Brent Sutter over to Flatley, over to Gillies, his 11th goal of the playoff series so far, and that's 1-0 for the Islanders. They almost made it 2. Watch this move by Tonelli. Goes in, beats the defenseman badly. They're sorry. Goes in. Fuhr makes a great save. They're right back in it. Now watch the move by Glenn Anderson right here. Sucks in the defenseman, gives it over to Kevin Lowe. Lowe breaks in on Smith. Pulls him, and it's 1-1. It's 2-2 right now. Gillies and Messier have scored for the Oilers and Islanders respectively. Now the Jays are down in Minnesota tonight. Dave Stieb looking for a club record 6 wins in a row. He gave up a solo homer to Kent Herbeck in the second, and it's 1-0 Minnesota in the 8th. We'd better get it together soon, or the Tigers are going to be out of sight. They're in Detroit tonight against the Mariners. 1-1 right here. Watch the catch by Gorman Thomas off Dwight Lowry. Hits it out to left. Thomas diving catch out and left there. Saved a run. In the third, the Tigers sort of took over right here. Lou Whitaker lays one down. Can't pick it up, and Whitaker is on first base. Here comes Darrell Evans. He drives in Whitaker, and it's 2-1 for the Tigers right there. Then in the third, bases loaded, Howard Johnson singles, drives in Kirk Gibson and Darrell Evans, made it 4-1 for the Tigers at 6-4 Detroit in the ninth. Speaking of baseball, the high school season's in full swing, and a miss is as good as a mister in this sport, according to Russ Salzberg.
The Eastern Commerce Saints are playing the Riverdale Red Raiders this afternoon, and with number 13 Linda Booley on the mound, it looks like they might stay undefeated. Riverdale did manage to chip away at the talented right-hander for 2 early runs and had the bases loaded with 1 out in the top of the third. But Linda got out of the jam by striking out the next 2 batters, and from then on, it was all Eastern. In the bottom of the third, center fielder Julie Mason starts things off by drilling a shot to left that Red Raider Joni Bonner can't find the handle on. Then, following a walk and a double steal, second baseman Charlene Lawson singles up the middle, giving Eastern a 3-2 lead. Left fielder Sandy Woodgate then follows with a grounder to third, which should be an easy out. But a throwing error by Jackie Young allows another run to score as the Saints win it 4-2 and remain undefeated. I'm Russ Salzberg for City Pulse.
This is National Fitness Week. All kinds of participation events going on tomorrow. The kids at Besborough Public School in Leaside got an early start on things today. This is a skip-a-thon that went off this afternoon. Over 200 kids raised somewhere near $2,000. I think that's quadruple Dutch right there. There's double Dutch. There's Brent Knightley. He was the top fundraiser, brought in over $100. Great job by the kids from Besborough Public School in Leaside. I guess that's it for sports.
Kids showing the way now. Apparently, skipping is one of the best exercises you can do for
a real tough one. Yeah, you don't want to go too long. Well, you know, like 10 minutes of that and enough.
10 minutes, 10 seconds is all they get out of me.
Coronary.
Thanks, Howie. Up next, the hottest craze in California since the Frisbee and the hula hoop. Fight. And now to the latest craze in California, firewalking. That's right, scuttling barefoot over a bed of hot coals. Californian hot coal converts are convinced that coal walking is a challenge of mind over matter, but Douglas Kiker is skeptical.
California, laid back off the wall, land of the fad, home of the trend. And here, the very latest, firewalking, bare feet, red-hot coals.
All right, good job. Come on. Good walk. Nice walk.
But wait a minute. Is it just another fad, or is there something else here? Something beyond fad, perhaps beyond rational explanation?
Nobody tried to minimize the fact that you could die from this.
I didn't feel any heat. I felt the crunching of the coals.
Medical students at the University of Arizona under Dr. Andrew Weil. All of them firewalked.
There's something more to it, and that is, as we start out the conversation, the control of the mind over the body and how that may relate to illness and health.
What reactions have you gotten in talking to other people about it?
Disbelief.
Anthony Robbins and others like him have taken thousands of Californians across the coals. They say it is a reprogramming of fears in which music plays a part. But first, a word from the lawyers.
If I do choose to walk on the coals, I am fully aware that there are no guarantees regarding my safe passage.
As I take the first step, my body will do whatever it takes to protect itself.
On this night, more than 100 people walked across this bed of hot coals, temperature at least 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is no phony magic trick done with mirrors. The firewalkers are not hypnotized. The fire is real.
I think mental state is very important. No, I don't see, there's no way of convincing other people of that who don't want to see that, but it seems to me obvious experientially that it's got to play a role, and that mental state can very much affect physiology.
You can do.
A well-known burn specialist told us things happen that we do not have an explanation for. This night there were a few minor blisters, but no burns.
And you know you're the one who can walk on fire. You're the one who can walk on fire.
Douglas Kiker, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Say, looks like fun, doesn't it? Final results of our phone poll are in tonight, and it seems most people believe that today's budget does rather, signal a provincial election. 72% of our callers expect an election, 28% do not. Thanks for calling in tonight. Next, the latest from the streets of Toronto in this live report from our chief assignment editor, Glenn Cole.
Thank you, Gordon. York Regional Police, in cooperation with Metro Police, have made one more arrest in connection with the bank holdup this afternoon. 22-year-old Matthew Dickens of Bexhill Road in Scarborough is charged with robbery and weapons offensive. This wraps up all of the arrests, but the investigation continues. And OPP are investigating an accident which occurred a short while ago on the QEW westbound at Islington. A half-ton pickup truck with two people on board was slowing down on the highway when it was suddenly rear-ended by a Corvette with just the driver on board. The impact flipped the truck. There were no injuries, amazingly enough, and charges are pending. Traffic has now returned to normal on the QEW. And to find out if the weather is going to be normal, live down to Queen Street and weatherman Brian Hill.
It's been so far from normal so long, I'm sure most people don't remember what normal is supposed to be. Let's go to the 5-day forecast. Let me show you what it's going to be like tomorrow morning. Cold. But it's not going to be that way all day long. 15 for a high tomorrow. That's still below normal. Normal is 17. Okay, well, what else can we do? Thursday, get up to normal. Mainly sunny skies. And on Friday, 20 degrees above normal is a possibility. 50-50 mix of cloud and sun. Looks like a beautiful end of the week. We think that on Saturday may just get glanced by a little shower, and high of 19, still nice and mild, and that for quite possibly the remainder of this upcoming holiday weekend, the weather will be quite nice. So there's some nice news to dwell on as we get closer and closer to 24th of May. Now, Kathy Katzner, entertainment.
And tomorrow I'll bring you a taste of Madeira, the new show at Theater in the Dell, and who knows what rock star will get arrested. Now I think it's time for sports. Jim?
Well, the Oilers are leading now 3-2. The Jays of Minnesota are tied 1-1 in the ninth. And I should mention that Bobby Clark was named as the new general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers today.
Yeah, they're going to retire number 16 at the beginning of next season. So.
Probably will.
Thanks, Jim. That's City Pulse for tonight. I'll have the next tomorrow night at 6. Until then, thanks for tuning in. Good night.